Welcome to those of you who are joining from wherever you're joining. We don't necessarily need to know where you're from, though we know there's lots of people from many different countries around the world. But if you want to check in with us in the chat feature down there below, just click it once. And of course, it'll show us your name immediately. And you can let us know this call specifically was marketed only to people with a Christian counseling, therapy, pastoral counseling, 12-step group facilitation, 12-step sponsor of some kind, lay counseling, any kind of a people helping role like that. That's who we were principally looking to attract to this call. That is by no means the only people we train here at Professional Christian Coaching Institute, but we wanted to be able to kind of share a common language today in this presentation. So that's why you're here. So if you want to click on chat and let us know what is your background, just put in whatever one of those titles or some other one is the skill set and the calling that you are already stewarding for the Lord in the work that you do, either professionally or in ministry. I have a background as a licensed clinical social worker, and I became board certified as a clinical diplomate in sex therapy. That back about 30 plus years ago was a very unusual thing for a Christian. In fact, I had a private practice as a Christian psychotherapist, Clearwater, Florida. Any of you that are familiar with the Tampa Bay area, it was the largest Christian practice either side of Tampa Bay. We served the 600 and some odd churches in that area, Protestant and Catholic, but it was very distinctly Christian, and it was all licensed practitioners or interns that I was supervising, and I figured that's what I would do all of my career. Out of that work, my wife Rachel and I authored this book. Some of you may be familiar with it, maybe not. It's called When Two Become One. To our delight, it became a bestseller, and it is out in multiple languages. In more than 20 years, that's still out there. Guess what? I haven't held my license, nor have I practiced as a psychotherapist in about 25 years. I finally just surrendered my license in 2007 because I was like, this is crazy. I did all those years to get it. That was 12 years. I'm very glad I had, and there's no question I am not going back into that stewarding of the gifts and talents that the Lord gave me because he's called me into a new area, and that being obviously coaching. But knowing that background, that does set the stage for what eventually became the journey that Rachel and I have out here, which is what I'm drawing from on the personal front that ties in with the professional front that you're seeking on understanding this field of coaching. I am the founder and president of Professional Christian Coaching Institute. That is the world's largest distinctly Christian school that is fully accredited by the International Coaching Federation. If you've checked into this field at all, you probably have come across the ICF. They are a regulatory board. Now, they do not have licensing ability. There is no such thing as licensing in the field of coaching. There are certifications, and again, there's more than 10,000 of them out there because anybody can certify you in anything. Okay, you could each open your program today and offer a certification, and you're not doing anything illegal or immoral. It may or may not be all that high integrity, but you know, it's not wrong for you to do that. But the International Coaching Federation over the last 30 years has bubbled to the surface very clearly as the gold standard of this field. And it is truly a distinct and separate profession from that which all of us in this room practice. Whether you are a counselor, again, or therapist, or pastoral counselor, or there are some here who are perhaps certified in spiritual direction, these kinds of things. All of those have their place. In no way, shape, or form am I going to be espousing coaching as better than, nor replacing any of these roles that we've all invested our lives in. In fact, the majority of you probably just continue doing what you're doing, but you might add on this new profession, and I do want you to hear that it is very clearly separate and distinct from what many times people do with the word coaching, since it's not a licensed term, it's unregulated, anybody can call anything coaching, and that is that they'll just take their version of people helping, so let's say you're a counselor, and you just say, you know, well, coaching's a really hot term right now. I can call what I'm doing coaching, and they just kind of rename the counseling that they do as coaching. Or consulting becomes, I'm not going to consultant anymore. That was an 80s thing, a 90s thing. When everybody's getting downsized, suddenly everybody was a consultant, right? There's no licensing for consulting. If you could get somebody to pay you as a consultant, congratulations, you're a consultant. But now they call it coaching. And there are many other forms of people helping that people just rename as coaching. Again, nothing wrong with it. But that is not the space from which we're speaking. And that is not what Professional Christian Coaching Institute is all about. We're very aware that we're bringing the name of Christ into the marketplace. And it is very decidedly my conviction that a Christian practicing any field of profession ought to be the most highly trained and skilled that they can be, because you're bearing the name of Christ. Whether your clientele know it or not, these are things that the Father's entrusting to us, things that we're going to be held accountable for before the throne someday, right? After we've pled the blood, then we're going to be judged according to what we have done. And we want to hear, well done, good and faithful steward. So as we seek to steward those things, we want to be serving at the highest level of professionalism. We don't want to be just taking some kind of a weekend wonder training program or watch these videos and fill out this workbook and boom, you're a certified blah, blah, blah. No. Not if we're bearing the name of Christ. So our mantra here at the Institute is actually raising the standard. You may have seen our logo. It's a battle standard. And that's because the word is a double entendre for us. We as Christians in this field of coaching are raising the battle standard of Christ, which is love. His banner over us is love. In this field that is all about helping people to discern how they are gifted and called, and what it is that God may have for them in this new season. Again, whether they're Christian or not, we won't use that Christian language if they're a non-Christian. But it is about that kind of growth into fullness on our life journeys that this field is. And of course, there is the standard of professionalism, that double entendre. We are coming in as Christians and we're saying, oh, yes, we know what the ICF is. Oh, yes, we are trained at that level. Oh, yes, we understand that when you read Inc. or Money Magazine or Forbes or Fast Company or any of the business magazines out there, and they talk about getting an executive coach or a corporate coach or a leadership coach, guarantee you those things are going to say, be sure they are ICF certified. Again, not licensed, but certified. It's a de facto kind of a marketplace value, though you don't have to have that licensure. Well, that's why we have fought for these more than 25 years to be sure that we stay at the forefront of this field as it emerges. And there really is now a very large worldwide Christian movement of Christians in coaching. We have personally trained more than 5,000 in more than 90 countries, all of them live in real time, and helped them not just learn how to do coaching, but helped them to establish the business that will enable them to make a living coaching. And I want you to carry that thought throughout the rest of tonight. I'm mostly going to be focusing on what is coaching compared to what we all know. We learn new things by comparing them to what's familiar. So I'm going to take our counseling background and say, yep, it's like that, and it's different in these ways. So we're going to do compare and contrast. But I want you to remember that learning how to do it is very different from making the phone ring with clientele who will pay you to do it. And so we carry both of those responsibilities as a school. In fact, the only course that I still teach myself exclusively here at the Institute is the business building course. I've built or co-developed all of the other courses, but we have a rapid launch course into the field to give you the skills so that by the time you complete that first course, you have the potential to have paying clients. In fact, more than 50% of our students do complete that course with paying clients on their caseload. But then I take the business building course and marry that up with it and say, let's build you a real, legit business. Part-time, full-time, whatever you feel the Lord calling you to, but I will walk you through in a Lego block, build it step-by-step kind of a manner so that you come out definitely knowing, yeah, I can make a living in this the rest of my life. Even when I'm, quote, retired, or if my body gives out and I can't really get in the car and put on the chicken suit and go out and do the song and dance of whatever your job or business has been up to this point. Or if we wind up in wheelchairs or are already impaired, have quadriplegic or paraplegic, if our brains are intact, we can do this kind of work from home with clientele all over the world. And we equip you to do that. And yours truly is Exhibit A in that regard. Twice I have walked right on the edge of the grave. And whoops, we've got some background noise there. And the Lord has enabled me to provide for that family I was telling you about of 7 children and my dear wife. And that's out here on a farm, on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to get to that story in just a moment. But let me finish up by showing you a little bit about the transition in as I plug my story into your life. My story is not your life. Your story is not my life. But again, we learn things by comparing and contrasting. Back when I had that psychotherapy practice going, and it was going and blowing. I mean, like I said, we were the largest practice either side of the bay. We were loving what we were doing. It's totally fee for service, didn't bill any insurance, no mangled care going on here. It was totally fee for service, no sliding scale. And we were referred by Protestant and Catholic churches all over the Bay Area. Loved that, figured surely this is what I'll be doing the rest of my career. And Rachel and I began having a lot of late night, what we called tea time talks. It was chamomile tea. It was after the kids were down in bed. This was back when we had just 2 and then 3 kids. And we would stay up late at night drinking chamomile tea and getting sleepy and dim all the lights except the one in our living room. And we would dare to ask what we didn't know at the time were coaching questions. What if? Have you ever thought about? What would it be like if? What do you suppose it would take? My goodness, what would that mean? Do we know anybody else who's ever done such a thing? Those kinds of just like blue sky exploration things that say, what if? So here, loud and clear, nothing was wrong. Nothing was broken. It was great. I lived 10 minutes from my private practice. I could pop home sometimes and have lunch. It wasn't very convenient usually because I'd be preoccupied with work, but I could do it. And I was home 4 nights a week. Thursday nights, I always did group therapy, but I was home on the weekends. It was wonderful. So nothing wrong. And the song of the heart, that kind of stuff that maybe as you wrap up your day, or maybe as you're lying awake, having trouble falling asleep, and just the Lord is calling or pricking something in your spirit and saying, there's more. There's a new season. Behold, I will do a new thing. Will you not perceive it? It's that kind of stirring that we were listening to. And so it was more from the personal front than the professional front, that asking those questions, Rachel and I made some pretty radical shifts. So I'm going to take you off screen here. I'm going to do screen share with you for just a moment and show you just one picture. This was a night that I came home. It had obviously been a bit of a rough day because you can see the toilet paper there, snotty noses, a little bit of sickness going around. And these are the 3 children and the wife, the 4 people that I love most in the world. They were zonked out. They literally did not hear me come through the door at night. Rachel was exhausted. And there's Alyssa. She's just spaghetti legs. She's the tallest one there. I think she was probably about 6 at this point. Colin all cuddled up there. He was probably 4, 3.5, 4, and Sarah or Gracie rather zonked out. But actually, there's a 5th person in this pitiful chair there. Rachel was pregnant with baby number 4. Drew was on his way. And again, this was that kind of me coming face to face with the questions that time is not going to wait on for you to come up with answers for. Seasons come. You discern or you don't, you act or you don't, but then they pass, right? Windows close. So I'm going to take us off a screen there and just say, for me, that night, I can't believe, I mean, that was way before cell phones. So I don't know where I found a camera, but I went and got a camera and took that before Rachel heard the click of the camera. That for me was just a watershed moment. Like, okay, Chris, you've come this far, so much is good. Are you hearing the song and are you daring to begin to answer it? And by that point, I had already heard a presentation on coaching. It was from a psychotherapist turned coach. I did not know him from Adam, but I had saved his card because I knew when I heard the presentation, something inside of me went, pay attention. And so I contacted him. I said, look, you don't know me, but I was at that presentation. It was like a 10-minute talk that he gave at a big workshop. It was an all-day workshop. They just gave him the podium for 10 minutes because he was doing this weird new thing that nobody had heard of. But I paid attention, and I said, I think I would like to do what you're doing. And I explained a little bit about why we were living in a subdivided neighborhood, Tampa Bay, doing great. But we had a desire to possibly move the family out to my family farm, which is, of course, where I'm talking to you from tonight. We've lived here about 36 years. And I said, I would love to be able to do coaching if that would let me do it actually from home. I don't want to bring my therapy practice into my home. But if I'm understanding coaching, I'm understanding it does not have the liability risk that psychotherapy does. There's not the kind of volatility and brokenness and suicidal, homicidal, assaultive ideation kind of stuff. And he's like, yep, that's right. It's coaching. It's about growth. Okay, so I think I would like to do it. Can I hire you to teach me? He said, well, I will coach you and I will teach you. And so I did. And we began very rapidly to move in the direction of closing down that chapter of our lives, selling that home, and helping all of my therapists, of course, to find other practices established. And we terminated all of our clients very effectively over a 3 to 6 month period. We did a very nice shutdown. But then we moved out here to the dirt road in the middle of nowhere where we have lived on our family farm. I'm going to read you a real quick piece that came out in a magazine back then. I was writing for several magazines about what I was doing in sexuality as a Christian. Probably many of you actually still get this from the American Association of Christian Counselors, their Christian counseling flagship magazine. Did a feature story in there, but this was from the Psychotherapy Networker. I don't think this is published anymore because magazines have gone the way of the dinosaur. But at the time, this was their cover story. Coaching, is it the wave of the future? There's a 10-page feature article in here. Here's how it starts out. In the late 1990s, Christopher McCluskey ran a thriving marriage and family therapy practice in Clearwater, Florida. He had 4 colleagues working with him, none of whom needed managed care clients to keep their appointment books full. His hourly fee was $95, but he still had to refer potential clients elsewhere. McCluskey had every right to consider himself a success, but he wasn't content. I'm not sure I would have worded it that way, but his daily regimen, commute, work, commute, sleep, left him physically and emotionally drained. Again, I don't think I would have put that way, but they have license. He didn't have enough time for his wife and children, and secretly, he pined for his family's 440-acre homestead in the foothills of the Ozarks. But Edgar Springs, Missouri, population 195, and that is literally, I think our population now is about 208 last time I saw the sign, was hardly the kind of town that could support a psychotherapist. One day in 1997 at a workshop on keeping free of managed care, he heard a 5-minute presentation on coaching, the hybrid of therapy, organizational psychology, and self-help that is attracting therapists eager to reconfigure their practices. The new discipline intrigued him, not least because coaching, unlike therapy, was typically conducted over the telephone, way before video, right? Way. This was dial-up internet. This was only when we were getting those little discs. You've got mail. Nobody was on the Amazon wasn't up yet. Okay. Very different era, but via telephone, which meant that a practice could work just about anywhere, even in a town as tiny as Edgar Springs. And it did. Telephone, dial-up internet, and a fax machine. And we established this private coaching practice out here. So here's what I want to cover today before I take us to a time of open Q&A, because all of you probably do have some familiarity already with coaching. I'm going to give you, I think, enough so that we all have a more common background from which we're drawing, and then I'm just going to open it for all of those questions. Again, probably a quarter till the hour or so. We'll get to that. But let me pull us back here onto screen share with the things that I want to be sure that we cover. Again, can you see that, Em? Can you let me know? Is that good? Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's showing.
Okay. So for tonight in this open house, I'm going to address very simply, but powerfully, I hope, what is coaching, this totally unregulated, at least unlicensed field that anybody can call anything coaching. What is it from a professional perspective, if you actually wanted to make a living at it, full-time or part-time? What are some of the basic distinctions between coaching and what we're familiar with, counseling or therapy, or all of those other iterations of it? And I'm going to give you 5 very specific, very brief, but clear distinctions between the field. Again, for the purpose of compare and contrast. This is what it is. This is what it's not. Thirdly, why is it so attractive? And it is. It has remained one of the top fastest growing professions in the entire world for about 20 years now. It's just over 30 years old as a profession. And I'm so thankful for the International Coaching Federation that has really codified practicing skills and has a code of ethics for it, and the 3-tiered level of certification and accreditation for training programs like ours that train according to those standards and all. But why is it so attractive? Why are so many counselors and therapists not necessarily closing their practices like I did, but simply adding it to the services that they already do, and eventually perhaps transitioning out as they kind of, quote, semi-retire or become more portable, take care of loved ones that are handicapped, aging parents or whatever. Why is it so attractive? And then fourthly, can you do both coaching and counseling or therapy? Okay. Assuming the answer to that is yes, and I'll explain a little bit about why and what you need to watch for, then is training or certification needed? And you already get some of my bias there, but I'm going to give you a realistic perspective on what you do need and what you probably don't need to worry about. And then next, can you make a living at this? I'm just going to touch on that, but I'm going to kind of explode what that question's really asking. And then, like I say, I'll take us to live Q&A, and I'm going to plug in the that rapid launch course that I was telling you about in life and leadership coaching, and that successful coach course that I teach on building your business around it. We have our final offerings of the year coming up here in this very month of October for both life and leadership. So I will get to that toward the end before I take questions, but they are available still. I will tell you right now that life is almost full. Leadership still has several seats. Many of you with business backgrounds or ministry backgrounds may be interested in that one in particular, but 2 different applications will go over that. So that's the focus for tonight. So let's go back to the first question. What is coaching for us as Christians? Whether you were going to target your practice to Christians or non-Christians or both, which is actually what most do, I'm going to suggest that for we as Christians, the first place that we go for truth, for definitions of anything, should always be scriptures. Okay, so let's look at some of the scriptures. I'm only going to give 2. There are many that we use in the Institute here, but one of the most powerful from the Old Testament is from Proverbs. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. This is such a pregnant sentence that I could do the entire rest of our time just unpacking this, and I would barely scratch the surface. There is so much power and truth in this concept that there are, in fact, purposes. We know that from Scripture all over the place, right? I know the purposes I have for you, and they are to prosper you, not for calamity, right? I knew you before I knit you together in your mother's womb, right? The gifts and the call of the Lord are irrevocable. The purposes of a person's heart, they're in there. Whether they're a Christian or not, the Lord knit them together, and they are in there, and they are irrevocable. What does that mean? Well, it means they're not going to be taken back. They will not be revoked. They may or may not be ever discerned, or even being discerned. They may or may not be operationalized or lived out, but they're in there. And they're deep waters. And for us desiring to come alongside of someone else who's seeking to discern more about their gifts or their calling or their next season or leveling up or transitioning on or the now what next kind of thing, you recognize immediately you, as the people helper, don't know what those purposes are. You could not possibly wisely advise them, guide them, direct them, counsel them. Think about those words. They all speak of something that is from the outside of the client, and we're seeking to impart it to them, like a discipler to a disciplee, right? Or a mentor to an apprentice, a teacher to a student. It's outside, and we're seeking to impute it to them, to impart it to them, to pour it into them. It's an outside-in model that we're used to working with. We're in those kinds of roles. A therapist to a client. They've got a hole in them. They've got brokenness. They don't know what's wrong. They're in our office partly because they don't know where else to go. They may not even believe very much that we're going to be able to help, but it's our job to help them figure out, first of all, what's wrong. That's why we're trained as diagnosticians, as practitioners, to help figure out, I see the symptoms. What are the symptoms' origins, right? What are they there for? So from that outside in, that's how we normally work. But here, where we're talking about purposes of a heart, a new season, a new vision, discernment, discovery, those are inside the person, and we couldn't be an expert on those. We could not arrogantly seek to advise them. We instead seek to draw them out. Similar to that, but from the New Testament, and looking at how we engage in conversation, but in a different way again than we would if we were the counselor or the therapist or the pastoral counselor or discipler or any of those other roles that we're used to. This one we're all very, very familiar with. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. This is always the life of the Christian, right? But even for people who are on their journey and they haven't yet discovered Christ, Christ is calling them, right? He's wooing them. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is for you, specifically his good, pleasing, perfect will. I know the plans that I have for you. I have come that they may have life, and that to the full. To be able to test and to prove, to discern, to discover God's will, and to step more fully into it in boldness in a new season of life. There's something here about being transformed through a process of renewing of our minds, challenging old mindsets. We all know the power of a paradigm shift. When we suddenly, in fact, I'll take us off of screen here. I think that was I was going to give you the definition here of coaching. So yeah, let me do that, and then I'll take us off screen so you can see my smiling face again. For what the ICF does with this, the International Coaching Federation does with this same concept, is to give us a simple one-sentence definition of this field, and I love it. Again, very pregnant with lots of powerful meaning, though it is secular in orientation. They define coaching at the professional level as partnering, it's a very powerful word, in a thought-provoking, you hear the mind being engaged here, and provocation of thought, working through neuroscience to engage the neocortex, the highest part of our functioning. Get us out of the amygdala, right? The fight, flight, freeze, or appease part. No. We want to get up into the creative part, the right-brained part, the what-ifing part, the blue sky brainstorming part. Partnering in a thought-provoking and creative process, that process of discovery, of unveiling, of having revealed. And the purpose for that is to maximize our potential as human beings, and for us as Christians, as human beings made in the image of God, with gifts and calling for which we're going to be judged, right? All of that is there. Again, whether you're working with Christian or non-Christian clients, that's what the ICF is defining this field is, and that is what we are training practitioners to be able to do. And that's why these distinctions become so important. Because we're going to do people helping, but it's quite different than what we are used to. In fact, I'll just lead with this. I started to allude to it there just a moment ago. The conversations in which you're going to be engaging your clientele when you're coaching them in that partnering and discovery process, that drawing out of the deep waters kind of stuff, since you can't advise them, you don't know the path, you don't know the journey, you're trying to help them have that experience that hopefully every one of us has had, where maybe you're on a retreat with a dear friend, or maybe you're doing what Rachel and I do all the time. We call it windshield time. You're out on a date night and you're just driving, right? You got the wheel in your hand and the two of you are just there in the car and there's nothing to do. Leave the radio off and you're just talking. And one of you asks a question. The other one just starts kind of expounding upon thoughts and pieces of the question. And suddenly you hear something come out of your mouth, from you, to you, through you. It came out of your mouth, it went into your, and it stops you in your tracks and you realize, man, I needed to hear myself say that. Well, it didn't come from my partner. It probably came by the Holy Spirit prompting, but it came to me, through me, in that process of listening while we stayed in question. What I would suggest is that one of the ways to think about what you're doing when you're practicing this field is you are not dialoguing with your clientele. This is a monologue, actually. What I'm in right now with you, unless you're using the chat feature here, we're monologuing. You signed up for that. You wanted me to give you some A material. I hope I'm giving you some A material, cognitive as well as heart stuff here. But a monologue is not how we would normally work with our clients in counseling. It's a dialogue. It's back and forth, as it should be. But in coaching, we would generally say that you as the coach seek to be largely invisible. You're like a little disembodied voice on their shoulder, in their ear, asking the questions that are begging to be asked, but then just prompting them. And what else? What more? Ooh, wait, stop, explore that. What does that mean? What would that look like? You're there helping them to stay in that space of discovery. And I call that way of being and that skill set that you're using there a facilitated monologue. You're the facilitator as the coach. The client is monologuing from themselves, to themselves, through themselves. And you keep it going until they have those aha, discovery, discernment moments. And their spirit resonates so truly within them that then not only do they get it much more fully than I could have possibly handed it to them if I did have it to hand to them, they not only get it, they can see many more of the fingers that it has and where to run with it. They know what some of the next steps are immediately. And we know from outcome-based stuff in learning theory, the likelihood of their follow-through is 10x'd. In other words, their buy-in. Because they heard it and they got it. What did they get? They got the song of their heart. You helped call that forth. You drew that out from those deep waters. They caught it. The likelihood that they will finish up that session and actually engage is dramatically greater. So let's hit these distinctions very clearly. I'm not going to put us on screen share for this. I just want you to stay with me here in the cognitive as well as the emotional. So some of these distinctions, whoops, let me get to my notes here. 5 key distinctions here. First, we would hear, I think already, that there is an orientation around the purpose that you're gathering that has much more to do with growth than it does with healing. So if you'll think about those as kind of 2 ends of a continuum, the continuum being people helping. Again, this is not better than, it's different than. And so it's not replacing. And there is a messy middle where I'm not sure if it's counseling or therapy or coaching, and it's probably a little bit of both. And frankly, I think at a certain point, any visual is going to break down, because I don't believe if down here on this end is growth through coaching, I don't believe any of us can ever grow while not also simultaneously healing some old junk. And I don't think any of us can do some serious deep healing stuff and not simultaneously go, wow, I'm growing. So I know that it's not a perfect picture, but if you'll kind of separate the 2 fields and your way of being, all of you have had the experience of working with someone in a state of brokenness, and your orientation, of course, you're a healer. You're there to help them to get from that space of brokenness to at least some relative space of stability and health and functioning, right? If you're building their insurance company as a practitioner, that's what the diagnostic code has to do with, right? From brokenness to relative stability and health. But all of us also know the experience of getting somebody to that space, and then it's like, yeah, so we're kind of done with the counseling piece here. There's nothing more that's broken. But the person is saying, yeah, but I know what I don't want to do. I'm not so clear about what I do want to do. Can't I continue to work with you? And again, if we're building insurance, the answer is actually no, unless you can move them to something that's out of pocket. And boy, be clear on your distinctions of which hat you're wearing there. If you do that, we'll get to dual relationship a little bit later. But no, at that point, the counseling or therapy for brokenness and healing is done. But that's the place at which coaching would just pick up. So it's kind of like a handing off of the baton to do growth work. So there's one of your big distinctions. The orientation is much more toward the growth side than toward the healing. A second important distinction is the primary motivators that you're going to be seeking to tap as the coach practitioner. I would suggest many times in therapy, that client who's coming in for their intake session, they are there partly because they don't know where else to go. They might not know you from a hole in the wall. And they may not have a whole lot of help that you're going to be able to help them. They just don't know what else to do because they're in so much pain that they're saying, it's going to hurt worse for me to stay the way I am than it's going to hurt for me to change, right? Like they talk about in the 12-step programs, you got to bottom out first before you can begin to climb. Well, in that state of brokenness, their faith in the whole coaching process, look, or counseling rather, I've done my best and I'm here. It's a mess. You don't even know me. How are you going to help me? They may not have a lot of belief, but they're there motivated by largely pain. And pain's a great human motivator. I hate to be motivated by pain, but I'll do a whole lot of changing to get out of pain. I will also do a whole lot of changing, like you heard from our personal story, and like each of you may feel is needed for a new season of your life. motivated by the other great human motivator, passion. A sense of calling to a next, a greater investment in whatever it may be that you think God is calling you to steward. Those kinds of things about which we feel strongly will draw us like the carrot rather than the stick, right? But we'll change for both. When coaching plugs in, it's mainly seeking to stoke the fires of that passion. And we all know pain pretty much shows up and stays around until we do something, doesn't it? It doesn't go away very easily when it's serious. Passion is not that way. Passion is so fickle. Passion waxes. I will feel so passionately about something at a talk or a great sermon that I hear or whatever, and I'll get in the car and I can't really recount what it was all about. 24 hours later, I may have forgotten it entirely. It's like it just disappeared on the wind overnight, right? That's passion. It waxes and wanes, ebbs and flows. But the coach holds those pieces and parts of passion as you're in that facilitated monologue and brings them back over and over to the client to fan the flames of the what else. And who can you tap? And what other resources do you need? When could you do that by? You're helping them. You don't know, but you're helping them to stay on the journey. Third very important distinction here is the primary focus is, as you're hopefully hearing now, on the future when you're coaching. In psychotherapy or counseling or most of the other kinds of healing and brokenness work that we do, it's usually some degree of focus on the past and a lot on the present. We may be messing around in old family rules and roles that we played in dysfunction or previously undiagnosed disorders or whatever it might have been. And in the present, the patterns that we need to identify and bust up and start, adopting some new role. That's mostly where we live when we're doing psychotherapy or counseling. Coaching, not so much in the past. We're working in the present, but it's with a very strong future orientation. We always say in coaching that you coach to where the gap is. Like Wayne Gretzky's great quote about, right? I skate to where the puck is going to be, right? I don't skate to the puck. I'm looking to the gap between where I am right now, client, and where I want to be or where I sense God's calling me. That's where the coaching focuses, is on the future. Fourth distinction is that our primary purpose, as you've heard here, is as a coach, is for discovery or discernment, that from them, to them, through them stuff, for the purpose of transformation. Discovery or discernment for transformation into something different than their current way of being. That's the whole field of ontology, right? The study of being, not just doing things different. This isn't just about some accountability program, the coach on the sidelines blowing the whistle. Hey, get out there and do, No, 1,000 times no. This is about discovering and discerning for the process of transformation. That is quite distinct, I would suggest, from what most of us as counselors or therapists do, which is, playing with alliteration here, diagnosis for the purpose of treatment. You hear the D and the T there? Diagnosing for treatment, from discovering or discerning for transformation. We're on that same continuum. And fifth and final here is the desired outcomes you can now really clearly hear for us in coaching would be that the client finds themselves in a new space in life of thriving. Abundance, and no, I am not talking some cheap kind of prosperity gospel garbage. I'm talking about thriving in that abundance, whatever afflictions we may still be carrying, because each of us are told as Christians we got a cross to bear. Pick up your cross and follow after me. But in that space, he says, I came that you'd have life, and that to the full. So that fullness, that thriving space, that's where we're seeking to help the clients get to, instead of this kind of settling for that most of us live in most of our lives, right? That space of quiet desperation that Thoreau wrote about. That is certainly very distinct from where the desired outcome for counseling or therapy is just to get them from brokenness to stability, health, and functioning. Stability, health, and functioning is cool. It's great. But it's not the fullness. So there it is. Told you it'd be a bit of a drink out of the fire hose. I'm aware of our time here. We got about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. So I'm going to hit a couple of these very, very quickly. You can hear why this is so attractive for coaches, or for counselors rather, to move into. It's vision driven. It's growth into fullness. Who isn't excited about that? It is soul feeding work. I will tell you that when we actually moved out here to the farm, and by the way, we moved into a single wide mobile home trailer with 4 kids. We lived in a single wide mobile home trailer for 6 years while we built the business and finally built the home of our dreams. But I didn't realize what a toll those 12 years of doing psychotherapy had taken, especially in the sexual brokenness stuff, because that's at the core of our being. You break somebody in not just their sexual pain that they've suffered, but their masculinity, their femininity. You get broken. That's just a place of tremendous pain. And I was more, I don't know if I was burned out, but I was more drained and exhausted. And I was coming home at night and the best of me had already been spent at the office. So yeah, coming back out here, this soul feeding work, it was really quite attractive for me for a new season of my life. It's incredibly portable and flexible, as you can hear. Certainly now we live in a very different era. Who had any idea what the internet would do? Who had any idea that we could train with a school like this through the years of Rachel and I stumbling and fumbling with HTML code to make something work on the internet? Now we're in more than 90 countries around the world. Are you kidding me? No. God knew. And it's incredible to see the impact that it's having. It's part of a next season, I believe, of the move of the Holy Spirit in all of his different expressions and all of the brokenness that is our 45,000 different denominations around the world. Still, it is the body of Christ. And we are salt and we are light. And that is not just for bringing healing in spaces of brokenness, but it is for this abundance. The world needs this. So, in addition to all of that good stuff, why do people want to move into this? Because it is also a God-honoring stewarding of the gifts and talents that we have as people helpers. It is not bailing out, because the highest and best we could have done was always be only on the healing end. That's still good, and this is good. It's not a comparing and contrasting which one's better. They're just different. God-honoring stewarding of that. Obviously, it's practiced. For those of you who are licensed therapists, it's practiced across state lines. Yay! Don't have to get licensed in this field. No such thing. It's practiced across country lines. I have no idea how many different countries all around the world I've coached personally. And certainly, I mean, there's probably hardly a country in the world that we don't have Christian coaches working in. It's just incredible. So all of that, obviously, does have also tremendous income potential. I'll get to that in just a moment. So next question that was on our list there, can you do both? Yes. In a word, yes. And those of you who are licensed practitioners are very familiar with the Mental Health Board licensing laws regarding dual relationship. Dual relationship simply says that you must never be doing psychotherapy with someone whom you also are in interaction with in the other kind of capacity, including somebody you knew from the past, a past friend, family member, person that goes to your church and is in your Bible study or something. Can't mix those two areas. Very tough to do, but I'm a big one on stickler for that. When they're in brokenness, they need to be able to use me, so to speak, as their healing agent for whatever they need me to be at that day. Their dad, their authority figure, their boss, their healer. I may play any number of empty chair kind of roles for them, and they need to know me only in that. They run into me at the supermarket. They need to not have to even acknowledge me and not worry that I'm going to break that boundary, right? And say, hey, how's it going? No. So if you decide to wear both of these hats, I always encourage every Christian counselor or therapist, don't add it to your practice as just another service like you might do, say, psychometric testing or consulting or public speaking that you get paid for or other kinds of things. Those are all cool. But in coaching, I would argue, and my attorney would argue very strongly, you want to separate it out as a separate business. Actually open up a second either LLC or a sub-S corporation established under a different name, different bank account, different EIN, all of that. And again, these are things that I cover in the business side, so I'm not going to go into that today, but that's why I teach that course there, so that we run very clean practices, always that mantra of raising the standard. And we can do both ones, but we're very clear as the practitioner which hat we're wearing when we're serving which client. And the paperwork that I actually went so far as to use different colored paperwork for my counseling or therapy clients as for right. I didn't want any confusion as to which role I was being contracted to play for them. Okay. So can you do both? Yes. No dual relationships. Is training or certification needed? You would hear me clearly by this point to be saying, yes, I believe it is incredibly valuable. Is it needed? No, because anybody can do anything that they want to. You hear my personal conviction about that. But I will say that since I hired that coach to coach/consult with me on how to set up, I immediately recognized, whoa, this is really different than what I thought was going to just transition very nicely. I've been people helping for years, had no idea how much. So I immediately signed up for training of my own. There were only 4 schools at the time in the world that were ICF accredited schools. So I signed up for a course in one of those, introductory kind of class. And I remember class number 7 out of 15. I burst out in the middle of class. It was totally by virtual telephone. Couldn't see each other, telebridges. And I just said, whoa, wait a minute, sudden epiphany. I haven't been doing this. I was hearing all of the training through my therapy filter. So some of what you will learn through the training that we offer here is not just new information, it's actually unlearning. It's letting go of some old ways of showing up and being and learning some new skill sets. The International Coaching Federation has identified 8 what they call core competencies. Those are very specific skill sets, and we train according to all of those. We also integrate in a whole lot of neuroscience, again, to work with the body so that the person can actually get up into their highest functioning that God created within them, and they can truly be proactive instead of more reactive out of the amygdala, pain avoidance kind of thing. Oh, I got to change because my doctor told me if I don't, blah, blah, blah. No, not motivated by pain, up in that higher neocortex, all right? Yeah. So is it needed? Practically, I believe very strongly in it. And so consequently, I've built the school to have these 2 fast track or rapid launch courses. So there's where I'm going to transition this to Q&A. The essentials of leadership coaching and the essentials of life coaching. They're kind of think of them as 2 front doors to the same university. Okay. The institute here has 2 colleges, life coaching and leadership coaching. You can go through either one. And once you're in, you're in. You can mix and match all the other courses. This does not work like a degree program. I took 6 years to get my ICF certification, but I kept taking ICF trained courses about every 6 months or so while I built my business and provided for my family and built that dream home of ours and all. So you can start making income off of it almost immediately, literally. And that's not oversell. So it's built to accommodate. That's why we call it the essentials. So I would say just take either the essentials of life or leadership, both of them open here in October, and the successful coach, which the next offering of that actually just started a couple of weeks ago. So the next one will roll around in January. So it'd be kind of nice. You could start here in the fall, focus on the skill set, nice big 3-week break over the holidays, come back in January and marry up the business coaching course, and you're building both. You will, statistically speaking, have an extremely high percentage likelihood of completing just those 2 courses and having your caseload already started with income. So in other words, you'll be getting back financial, literal ROI on what you've invested. It's less than $3,000 for those 2 courses, and you'll be getting the income back already by that point. There's no guarantees, but that's what I built the entire institute to try to ensure for my brothers and sisters. Okay? That's what I would encourage you toward. So the final question before we go to the open Q&A here is, can you make a living? Yes. On the low end, if you were to charge the lowest fees that most private practicing coaches charge, which is about $50 a session, that's pretty low. Most coaches will coach 3 sessions a month, and normally we bill on a monthly basis, not session to session. We train you a whole lot as to why that is, but just think monthly for a moment. So 3 50-minute sessions a month would be $150. That is the low end of this field across all the ICF surveys. That's the lower end, at least in Western culture, in the U.S. and other first world countries. On the high end of the average is about $400 a month. Okay, again, for 3 scheduled sessions. So about 150 to about 400. So you might be somewhere in the middle, 200, 250, 300, but 150 to 400. If you were charging only the 150 a month and you had a caseload of only 25 clients, which if you think about it, is like 5 sessions a day, 5 days a week, 3 weeks out of the month. You'd have an entire month or week free. But if you do that, you'd be making $45K just off of that caseload. I guarantee you, if you got that kind of a caseload, the marketplace is telling you, you could bump your fee. You don't stay at that 150. So start bumping it up incrementally. If you have same 25 clients, but you've been growing the business over a couple of years and you're at that 400, which is still way on the low end of what coaches can charge, you're making 120K just off of the clients. Not group coaching, which is incredibly lucrative. Not testing like strengths or gifts or other kinds of inventories, assessments. Not speaking. No, I had 13 different income streams. It's none of the rest of that, just private clientele, very manageable caseload. I had more than 40 at one time, 25 clients. You can make incredible money from home, wherever. Then, like I said, explode that question. Can you make a living? A living has a lot more to do with just the income. It is the lifestyle, that ability for me. We've raised all of our kids here. We homeschooled them. They know nothing but this farm and all of their cousins living on other sections of it and their grandparents. It's crazy. It's like a throwback to Little House on the Prairies. I mean, it sounds really kind of like 100 years plus. But that may not be your vision at all. Whatever your vision is, this kind of thing facilitates it. So let's open up for some Q&A here.